guess it's morning for the West Coast. It's afternoon for everybody else. Good afternoon to the East Coast. Good morning to the West Coast. Wanted to talk a little bit today about the economy and how it operates in like two different fashions. You have the regulated economy, and then you have like the real economy. And so when you think about it in this two fashions, that you have a real economy and a regulated economy, it's not easy to really blame the government or the regulations on the behavior of people when they are acting on their own accord. You know, you can blame the government for a lot of things. You can blame them for the way that they tax people, the way that they, push the like environmental regulations and permitting and stuff like that. You have all kinds of blame that you can put around, but then again, you can't really blame the government for an individual person's decision. And so when I got to thinking about this today, I thought to myself, really there's more than just one economy that's taken place. Like, it's your interpretation of what it is that you are doing with those different parts of the economy that is out there. So let me kind of explain it like this. If you want to go buy a car and you went to a bank, the bank is going to look at your credit rating. They're going to say, okay, well, we have like this particular systematic way of going about giving you a loan for $1,000 to buy a car. If, let's use this for an example. And now you could go to the bank and go through this system of trying to acquire $1,000 to, purchase a vehicle with, or you could go to your buddy or your family, your rich uncle or something like that, and ask them for $1,000. Ultimately, your participation within the purchasing of the car was the same regardless of where you got that money from, right? So you're purchasing, that's the actual economy, is the buying of goods and services, right? Is that transaction that is happening there. Now, how you acquire that money, whether you got it from the banking system or if you got it from an individual person, it doesn't really matter when it comes to that actual transaction that has taken place. So when we think about like what it is that the regulatory system is all about when it comes to the financial regulation system, this is where most people look at what the economy is and how the government is interacting. And so we think about like what it is that they are doing to provide us with the ability to acquire a loan. And this is how we view the economy, not realizing that there is a whole private sector that has taken place out there that doesn't do any of that, right? See, this is where the real economy versus the private sector, financial, you know, government intrusion, all that other stuff. These are the two different economies that are happening out there. And so now when you think about what it is that the government is doing and how it is that they are trying to interact with the people themselves in order to, say, provide loans, and now there is a real economy happening out there that doesn't have anything to do with that, and you have to look at what these two different parts are, because most people don't. They just look at it as one side. So now as we look at it as two different parts, when we think about like the rich uncle being able to provide us with loans, and then you think about what it is that the government can do. Well, what happens in the economy? Let's just, now that we kind of have this two examples happening out here. What happens in the economy when all the rich uncles out there, all the family, all the people stop lending? They don't want to participate with, providing you with the ability to buy that car. How much pressure then that puts on the government to provide loans for the people? You see what's happening out here? So in order to bring in what it'd be fair, right, regulations, you have a private sector. Like, let's take government out of it for a second, and there was only private money out there. And then it would have to find market value just off of the supply and demand of money, people out there, the supply of people out there who can provide work and goods and services to pay back that money, right? And in between there, you would find whatever the prices would be for the money, right? The interest rates. But then you involve government into it. And so you're asking for a competitor, right, to bring in regulation to say, hey, we need regulation within this market. Well, that market still exists, whether it's black market, so to speak, or if it's within the regulated system. Private money exists. and people participate in that fashion. I mean, nobody knows if you went to somebody and borrowed $1,000, and nobody knows what the risk and reward from that is going to be, right? Whether or not the interest rate is going to be high on that, if there's any, or if you're going to get beat up or have your golf club stolen because you didn't pay it back. Nobody knows like the risk and reward in the private sector, but we do have a regulated system that does. So people say, hey, we need this regulated system in order to know exactly what it is that I am going to suffer the consequences from or reap the rewards from when it comes to this particular side of things. So now this is a competitor to the private sector. Right? We have to think about that. It is, because it still exists. The private sector still exists no matter what, whether it's black market, regulated, whatever, right? So you have two different sides to this that is happening out there. So now we have this regulated system on the government side that we look at, and we're like, hey, okay, so you have this set up so you have credit ratings and we have protection and we know that there's insurance and all kinds of stuff that goes along with it. But this competition, this competitor, is still competing against the private sector. Well, if the private sector begins to diminish and goes away, that puts ever more pressure on, hey, you need to do something to provide the money for us. You see what's going on here? See, this is how, if you look at it in this fashion, then you can see it much better on a bigger scale, and you take it to the globe. And you take it to the global pressure that comes from this, in which that you have a regulatory system out there, and then you have a shadow system that is happening, that's outside of this regulatory system. And the more that the shadow system diminishes, the more pressure it puts on the regulatory system. And this is really where people start to really get confused on what it is that they need from the government, or what they're demanding from the government, or what the government intrusion would be like, because of the situation that happens that nobody really knows anything about. They don't look at that real economy as being the real economy. They look at the government as being the real economy. They look at the regulatory system as being the real economy. The financial banking system as being the real economy. That's not it. Those people are interacting with the real economy, which is you and me and the decisions that we make. They don't know if we're going to go to our rich uncle for $1,000. The economy doesn't know, the government doesn't know that. Nobody out there in the world knows that. Only you, your rich uncle, and possibly the person you make the purchase with. All right? And so this is how if we look at it in this fashion, then we can separate ourselves not only from the government, but also from what it is that's taking place within the economy when you hear it on the news and the media and all that other stuff. Because now we have an understanding that there's also the real economy, not the media portrayed financial regulatory system that everybody is viewing and watching as the real thing. But then we look at it as the real economy from a bigger scale, knowing that there is this shadow system taking place out there, and that there is participation within the economy that doesn't have anything to do with them, doesn't have anything to do with the government, doesn't have anything to do with the banking system. Right? And when we start to view that particular economy, or understand that it exists out there, you can't really view it, because there's no place to say, hey, I made all these private purchases or all these private loans out there. It's quite assumed out there. But when that diminishes, it puts the pressure, all right, onto the government regulatory side of things. And this is where you have people start uproaring, getting mad. Hey, you need to do something about this. You need to be able to provide loans for us. See, these are this is one of the reasons why you see so much acquisition of like gold coming out of China, right? Because what happens when the regulatory system begins to fail, right? Hey, we have all these debts that are due with these bonds and stuff like that. Oh, I'm sorry, we're not going to pay them back. I don't know what to do about it, right? If that happens, it happens to people in their loans every day. You start, having defaults and bankruptcies and all kinds of stuff that happens from that. But that's all within the regulatory system. You don't pay your rich uncle back, what is he going to do? He's going to come beat you up, or take your golf clubs, or do so, or demand that you pay him the money, or do something, or you have to go. He'll drag you over to his house and make you go hay his field or something. I don't know what it is that you got to do to pay it back, but there's going to be consequences to pay from it. All right. But that's not part of the regulatory system. That's not has anything to do with it, but that exists out there. So now when you get into gold, and you're holding gold, and you have this regulatory system out there that's about ready to collapse or not doing well, the gold is security away from that. And it's one of the reasons why I feel that like things like, or places like China and a lot of people out there are securing or acquiring as much gold as they can possibly get right now for that inevitability that is going to come, because there's going to be defaults. There is more debt out there than there is the ability to pay it back. And so now if you have gold, now you have something that's outside of that regulatory system. It's outside of that banking system. It's outside of the governments. It's outside of all that stuff. Yeah, sure, they could come and confiscate and take and, and say, hey, you can't participate with our system if you have that, right? Or even make laws that will come and arrest you for having it and stuff like that. But again, this is like all part of the regulatory system. If the government wasn't part of it, then the real economy would still exist. That gold is still valuable. The black market part of things, right, outside of that system, it's still there. All right, 10 minutes into it. I was going to do a members only live stream today, but to be honest with you, I wasn't quite prepared to do it, and I wanted to read a little bit more through the documents that I was going to do that video with. So I figured I would come out here and talk about this particular thing since it was on my mind this morning. Let's go and read through some of these comments here. We got 157 people watching right now. Brody, hey Simon, we got Sage saying, oh, I broke my glasses yesterday. Okay, all right, UE. Hope you're doing well. I am. I hope you guys are doing well. Rich says, yo, UE, what did it be, buddy? Morning, Simon. Good morning. Lumber futures tanking. Yes, they are. They are coming down dramatically, and I wonder if they're going to get down into the 400s, and it certainly seems that they're not too far away from it now. We have, until the middle of next month before the contract closes. So hit the like on the way into the stream, everyone, because high likes and engagements equals full house. Yes, it does. Thank you so much for that, Brody. Don says, what up, Simon? Check mark says, greetings, Simon. Seisabo, Japan. Keep up the good work, Simon. Thank you so much. Mark says, Simon can do 27 consecutive push-ups. Don't kid yourself. He's one strong SOB. That's so funny. Yeah, I can do 27, I think. All right, raise your hand if you are struggling to provide for your family because of Joe Biden and his minions. Well, here's the thing, man. I don't blame you for blaming the administration, right, man? Because there was a time in my life I did the exact same thing. I would blame the administration on pretty much, I don't know, damn Obama on everything. Like, I don't know how many times I said that. Anyhow, you can look at it in that fashion, right? And you can blame it on this external, but the problem with blaming it on an external is that you have some sort of expectation that you can actually put somebody in the office that's going to fix it. And that's a very scary place to go to, because there is nobody coming. Right? There's nobody coming for you. There's nobody coming to save the economy, make it better for you, make it better for me, make it better for anybody else out there. There is nobody coming to do that. Okay? So blaming Biden for being in a bad position on why it is that you can't, find what it is that you need in your life is going to put you in a position of expectation and hope that there is going to be somebody out there who can make it better for you, and it's not going to happen. And so you'll be waiting for a very long time. It's best to just go ahead and accept the fact that you have this particular administration, you have the situation that you are in, you have this particular monetary policy that you are working with, and you do your best to figure it out so you can position yourself for a better future and outcome. But don't expect that you're going to be able to vote for anybody, or that everybody's going to see it in a way that is going to be meeting the expectations of a better future, because it's not coming. All right, you gotta do this on your own within the environment that you have right now, and there's no expectations of change. It is what it is, right? All right, so moving on. I broke my glasses yesterday. That sucks. All my glasses are broken. You know that? I guess I'm just hard on glasses. There we go. All right. The regulated economy is the real economy. It's not. Keynesian, monetarist, and other policy has long overtaken free enterprise. The United States is not capitalist and has not been for a very long time. Okay. Um, let's think about it like this. Marijuana is a great example of free market, right? Of where value is inside of a particular product, right? Because here in Oregon, and it's a great example of economics too, right? Because marijuana seems to defy everything when it comes to the economy, but yet it is by far the greatest example of how economics works. Right? So now, when marijuana is illegal, it has risk to it. And now with that risk comes reward. So if you have something that is risky, that means you are going to be rewarded fairly well for it, right? Doesn't matter what it is. It literally doesn't matter. If there is something that somebody wants out there and there's a law against it, then it'll be worth more. I don't care what it is you're talking about, right? And so if you have a risk and you have a reward to it, then you're going to have some sort of value that comes that is going to meet some market level to it, right? There is going to be a certain amount of product out there, right? Being like the supply of it, and there's going to be a certain amount of demand, the willingness to pay for it. And now, when you have it illegal and you have that value to it, then you have a lot of demand for a particular product out there coming from addiction or just party or whatever it is, then you're going to start finding a lot of value within this particular item because of how the laws are set. Okay? Now, if you take those laws and you regulate them to the point that it says, okay, they're not illegal anymore, and we're going to provide you with the ability to go ahead and do this freely without any regulation against it, right? As far as like, being able to consume or grow or have or any of that other stuff, we're not going to make any of that illegal anymore. So there's no more risk to this particular product. Then the reward goes away too. See, right now, here in Oregon, all the weed growers, a lot of them are suffering. Just look at it. There's a sea of green here in Oregon. So you take away all this regulation, all of a sudden, it's not worth anything anymore, right? Even though it's regulated in, when you think about it, you have laws and taxes and all this other stuff that goes along with it, but the risk that comes with it, that regulated risk is gone. So did the reward. There's no reward for it anymore. And so this is really where it's better to understand it, is that marijuana never had any value to begin with in the first place. And that if nobody cared and they didn't have any kind of some kind of corrupted idea that it's, I guess it's because of how potent it is and then, driving and all that other stuff. So I guess it would probably, be some sort of regulation inside of the consumption of it, like alcohol, when you think about it from that idea. But ultimately, there is no value to it. If it didn't have any laws to it, nobody would care. It wouldn't provide anybody with anything, right? But the moment that you start regulating it, the moment that you start putting things, as far as a risk on it, then you start getting rewards, then you start having value to it. You see where it comes from? This is how it really comes down. And so here, even in Oregon, when I look at what it is that marijuana was doing at one time, it was illegal here, but it wasn't illegal to the point that people were so scared that they would lose their entire livelihood. I mean, some of them would because if they were manufacturing or something, but the actual possession of marijuana, right? No big deal. Nobody cared. And so with that, there was plenty of supply, right? It was always around. And you never really had to go looking for it that much. I mean, you did. But it wasn't like it was that hard to go to. So when they made it legal, it was just just everywhere. Anyhow, moving on. Let's go down to the bottom here. All right. The Mary Jane example you're using speaks exactly to my point. Even simple taxing individual transactions between private parties is a form of government regulation. Well, I understand that. I mean, it is. But I guess where I'm kind of getting at is that if you were to take what is happening within the black market outside of the regulatory system of the marijuana industry within Oregon, it is absolutely devastating the amount. Like, if they made it illegal for us to, say, own or possess or whatever, and you like to grow and all that other stuff, if they had these actions that made it super illegal to do certain behaviors within marijuana, like the growing, like the manufacturing of it, right? I think you can grow like 4 plants and have like a pound of weed or something on you. It's just like it's an amazing amount. I don't know about it out in public. I think an ounce out in public or something. But there's certain regulations to it, but they're so like lenient on this whole thing that it's not even like even considered or something, right? But if you start putting a risk on it, like if you get caught growing, you're going to go to jail for the rest of your life, then all of a sudden you're going to have something where the marijuana value inside of Oregon would then start to increase because there would be less private growers taking that sort of risk. You see? Right? So they can tax the hell out of it. Like they tax the hell out of it now, right? It is like but it doesn't change the fact that there's no value left in it, right? And so the only way that you can really bring value to marijuana is to limit the amount of supply that is coming. The only way you can limit the amount of supply that is coming is to punish private people for doing it, for growing it, and then you can bring value to it, and then you can have all the other stuff that goes along. Man, I'm tired. All right, 236. Moving on here. Do you did you feed? Okay. Weighing the bundles in Wisconsin like $10. We're having insane. Okay, only on your. You guys are all talking here. Okay, my point on the U.S. being non-capitalist is to inform the many who blame capitalism for everything bad. It's almost nowhere at this time, or at this point. Yeah, I totally agree. When it comes to capitalism, I mean, you got to think you rise and fall on your own merits, right? That means that you don't have the private gains and public losses that we experience nowadays. And when you have the time in which that capitalism would truly shine and bring in the devastating moments of clearing out the dead undergrowth and malinvestments and the people who had indulged in irrational exuberance and all the other stuff, capitalism is coming to fix that. But then they don't let it happen. And all these regulations come in and say, oh, hey, we have to bail out and have all this, stuff to save the people because, we can't have all these people like, you know, hungry and losing their homes and doing all this other stuff, right? So all of a sudden, when capitalism is coming in to actually fix the problem, to come and do to rebalance the economy, then they don't let it happen. And so it's just like, okay, so you want to blame capitalism for all the bad things that you experience, but when capitalism is coming in to really fix the problem, and that's going to be some really bad experiences, right? Then you don't let it happen. And so when some people take advantage of that situation and really start to separate themselves from the poor because there's really no losses that happen to them, and if there is, the public just pays for it, right? And this is done all in the name of saving them, right? Because they couldn't have let capitalism function the way it really did. And then they want to blame capitalism for that. So, but it wouldn't have happened if they had let capitalism work in the first place, right? So now I don't understand, right? Is because you didn't let capitalism clear out the dead undergrowth and allow these big time people to fail, which they would have done, but they didn't because they taxed the hell out of the people and bailed them out, right? And so now they're bailed out and they say, oh, look what capitalism did. And it was like, wait a minute, that's not the way it works, right? That's not the way it goes down. There is no capitalism. It doesn't exist. right? And so to blame capitalism or certain particular aspects of capitalism is wrong. That's not the way it's happening. And it's not even really true to blame socialism either, because that's not truly what it is going down either, or communism or anything else. What we have is this corporatism, something of a combination of corruptness that really is to be blamed on the people themselves. Because if the people themselves were more astute to the Constitution and what their particular rights are, they wouldn't be voting for people who didn't understand what the hell the Constitution was, and we wouldn't have a government that would be behaving in the way that it is. This is one of the reasons why I don't even get political, is because none of these people care enough about our individual constitutional rights to say, hey, we can't behave in this fashion. They're like, oh, well, we're already here, might as well continue to go on with it, right? And it was just like, okay, well, I'm out, right? I'm out of that. And so understanding that there's government, the financial regulatory system, the real economy, my decisions that I make within all of this stuff. I mean, I could put all my money into gold and Bitcoin and be completely 100% out of that stuff, right? I mean, now I would have certain aspects of like the house and taxes and stuff like that that I would have to participate in, but there could be a way that I could get out of that as well and not participate in that fashion either. Right? So now all of a sudden my decisions and what it is that I am doing is now excluding those people out of my life. Now I'm not saying I'm doing that, I'm saying I could. Right? And if more people started doing that all of a sudden at the same time, there would be a different change in the way that the economy looks, the way the government looks, right? The way that we, interact with, the economy as far as how it is that we are able to acquire a home, right? All these things would begin to change. All right, Simon, do you actually see them hiking rates? Brody, I don't know. Like, see, the thing is that if the people are convinced enough of them actually hiking rates, then what will end up happening is the economy will end up positioning itself as if that rate hikes had already happened, and they may not be able to do anything at all, and they can sit there and say, well, now we can be in a wait and see approach. Right? So they leave it open-ended on a purpose, right? For a particular reason. And it's not because they want to adjust rates. It's because they want to be able to use that credible threat. And it's working, right? So it's not, I mean, the actual hiking of rates will make very little difference in the economy anyway, because it'll take 6 months to a year or even more before we really start feeling the effects of it. So it doesn't even matter, even if they do adjust rates, and if they do adjust rates in say 3 months, 6 months, a year from now, I mean, however long into the future from now, it'll be how much longer into the future before we really even feel the effects of it. It doesn't matter, right? What really does matter is what it is that the people are anticipating is coming from the Federal Reserve, because that is what's going to start moving the economy. So just look at the narrative out there. The narrative has no view of interest rate drops that are so prevalent that they were months ago, right? So like if you went back just, 3 months ago, 4 months ago, people were talking about how many interest rate cuts were coming. Nobody thought that they weren't going to cut. Nobody thought about hikes. I mean, they thought that was over. In fact, there was all the, Fed has shifted policy talk, right? They have now, like, people actually said that. And I'm one of the few people who are like, what are you guys talking about? Like, when did they say that? What document was, oh, the plot map? Oh, that thing? No, that's not them giving forward guidance, right? Forward guidance is actually them coming out and stating it within the press conference, saying we are doing this, not the plot map, which gives them like the idea of where it is that they feel interest rates should be going off of the current conditions, which conditions always change. That's the whole point, right? If conditions were like this going into the future, this is where the interest rates would be. Right? That's important to understand about that damn thing, right? It is not a predictor, right? What it is saying where the interest rate should be going off of current conditions, right? And if these conditions continue, but they don't continue, conditions change, right? And that's the important part to understand about that. That's why that plot map is never accurate, right? Or rarely accurate. All right, moving on here. Crony capitalism is big issue. It really is. Hi, Simon. Curious about other things that you do to disconnect from the system, such as growing a garden and having a deep water well. That's a good one. Just curious on your thoughts and your advice to others on it. I mean, I don't really take into consideration my like there was a time in my life that I was trying to separate myself from all that stuff. I don't really do it anymore, right? I mean, I'm on public water system, I pay my taxes, I do all the stuff, right? However, the skills needed to then step away from, say, being on the grid, if you can, here's the thing. Can you take 100 pounds of anything, like 100 pounds of vegetables or fish or some kind of other meat or anything that's out there that you need to preserve, and without electricity or anything else, right, other than canning equipment, be able to preserve that meat? That's an important skill. Like, with my wife can do that. Like, and that's really like a skill that I think very few people actually have. And so if you brought her a cooler full of 100 pounds of fish, by the end of the day, whether we had electricity or not, right? It would be a little bit more difficult to do it without electricity, right? But even without propane or any of that other stuff, I could do it with wood and or even charcoal or whatever. I could can that. I with my efforts and her efforts together, we could can that fish and preserve it by the end of the day. That skill alone, right there, right, to be able to have that, right, to be able to do all that stuff, that is very, very, very valuable. And so you can have all the off the grid, like long term living solution kind of stuff, where you're going to have deep water wells, solar panels. You have the ability to have a cycling of food, like you can raise, you know, chickens all year long or something of that nature, so you have constant protein, or rabbits or something of that fashion. All that stuff is a lot of fun and fun to do, and I have done all little aspects of all that. I think it's understanding and having the skills to be able to do it, I think, is the most important, because you don't want to be learning that stuff on the fly. You want to be able to know how that works, and how much you need to do, and all the issues that you have from it. So to me, that would be like probably the number one place to be. Like, if you can do that, if you could take, and you don't have to go out and get 100 pounds of something just to prove it. You can go out and do it with 5 pounds of something, just go and get a package of chicken and see if you can can that chicken without electricity, and can it properly. You gotta, it's a process, because you don't want to end up with botulism or whatever the hell that is. All right. Did I see a super chat? I did. All right. Awesome. Deutsche Leier, is that what that is? $1.99. Thank you so much. Make cannibalism great again. Ugh, terrible. Thank you for the $1.99. All right, so 260 people watching with 70 likes. Go hit that like button, everybody. Okay, probably easier to move to somewhere which aligns with your values and voting. Yeah, or just not give a shit about other people, right? I mean, that's really it. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong, I care about other people. I care about the people who are close to me and the people that I know and, have some sort of connection with, but I don't really care about the behavior of other people. That is not important to me. As long as it doesn't interfere with what it is that I'm doing and what I have going on, then they can talk and act and behave and do whatever it is that they want. If I don't like it, I'll get out of that area. Like, it's not up to me to make sure that people behave in a way that is appropriate to me, so long as it doesn't interfere with what I am doing. Like, that's my only thing that I have, against. If somebody was just like, no, you're doing it wrong, I'd be like, yeah, okay, whatever. It was just like, you can go kiss off, because I don't care. But I find that other people don't bother me. Like, I don't let them bother me. It's not like, go do whatever you want, man. Just don't interfere with what I got going on. And so, like, it's not like, unless you're like doing business on a regular basis, right? and you have people who are mouthing off to you and you're giving them opinion back, and you're having like this constant interaction with them of this kind of like I'm right, you're wrong kind of interactions, then yeah, you're probably going to want to be in an environment that, is more aligned with your values, so that those kind of interactions are going to be ones of like the positive for you, right? But I don't have those kind of interactions with people. When they talk like that, I just like whatever. I just let it go right on past, like water off a duck. I don't interact with it. I don't even care, enough to interact with it. So, people can say or do or behave or whatever they want, right? Now, again, I put my voice out here on YouTube, and if people want to hear it, they can come to YouTube and click on the channel and watch it. Right? I put most of my stuff right out here, and if people want to have a conversation with me in my own presence, cool, man, let's go and have a talk. But I don't put my views, like even when it comes to politics here on this channel, I don't put my views out there for people. I don't try to convince other people on how they should think about politics and stuff like that. I put these monetary policy views, this economic views and stuff like that because I want to learn more about it. That was my whole goal about this, was to say, hey, these are the things that I'm learning and understanding, and it seems so different from everybody else out there. And I just kept putting it out here to try and get a better understanding of what it is. And, I think it's totally working too. 36 minutes into this. 211. Okay, what do we got here? America is awesome. I can't believe so many people are down on this country. Oh, bro, I know, right? Like, I totally agree. Like, I mean, I see that there is a lot of issues that are out there if you make them your issue, right? Like, I don't make things a lot of my issues that aren't important to me. There's a lot of things that I do find important. There's some things that happen like within the public school systems that I'm like, oh God, is this really taking place? And I have to question a lot of things that are happening where with the indoctrination and stuff like that. But I would like to think that the me bringing my kids, raising my kids has a more of an impact on it than what it is that the rest of society is doing to them, because they do have to involve themselves in the society when I'm not around, right? So, you know, learning about it from family, and then understanding what it is from face value, right? I mean, this is one of the reasons why I find things so very interesting when it comes to a lot of people's perspectives out there. Like, I remember, I don't know what brought this up, what makes me think of this right now, but I remember and when I was in high school, there was a family that, actually, I wonder, that's probably a little too personal. I'm going to back out on that. Never mind. All right. Love hearing you talk, man. Random man who sits in a Ford Explorer, bringing me a lot of peace into my day. I spend most of every work lunch with you, hoping I can learn and be informed. Thanks for doing this. Yeah, blah, 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 blah. Great name, man. Um, you bet, man. I mean, this is really the best way to like learn something, is just to kind of get out there and just have a conversation about it, and to take on different perspectives. Like, I have been so like pissed at the mainstream media for a lot of things that they are portraying out there. And I know a lot of it is propaganda so that the people will behave in a certain way. And I understand what it is that they are attempting to do. And so I don't look at it as a negative thing, right? I mean, it is a negative thing when you think about it, right? This mass psychological game that they're playing with the people to try and create a particular outcome from it. But, it's happening, right? So it's like, okay, so what do you do about it? You can't change, like, I can't change everybody's mind. It's not gonna happen, right? I can only operate in a fashion that says, okay, this is taking place right now, and I can clearly see it. Like, I can clearly see it. And when people talk to me and I try to explain it, they call me crazy. So I'm like, okay, so I don't explain it to them anymore. Because I'm tired of being called crazy or that it's Biden's fault or something else like that. So it's just like, okay, so now I have to take that into consideration that this is what the people think, right? And so in order to understand that, I have to take on some sort of idea on how that thinking process works. Okay? Which means that you almost have to be involved in the idea of being, okay, how would the indoctrinated feel? How would they act? How would they believe? What would they say? Right? And so these are some of the things that you have to now incorporate in order to understand the economy, because my economy has to interact with that belief. Right? And there's nothing I can do to change that. Like, I would love for them to think like I do, so that way my decision making would be more appropriate for my beliefs, right? But I can't make my decision based off my beliefs of what it is that I feel should be taking place. I have to look at it on what it is and what these people think it is. And yes, they are going to change their beliefs if Trump goes into office, and I have to understand what that belief change is going to look like, because now I have to interact with that. Uh, I'm not advocating that. I'm just curious. Voting in the United States of amnesia. Let's cruise down here to the bottom. Okay. What do you propose instead of uniparty? I don't. There is no. There's nothing you can really do to change it. Like, I mean, do what you got to do. I mean, vote for who you think is the best, most appropriate person. You know, vote for the right laws and do all the voting that you can. I mean, do what you can, right? But as far as like, I mean, I don't look at it anymore as something that I was just like, man, this is going to be the best out. Like, I don't like. To me, it's more of like, I hate to call it this, but it's like a show. It's like, okay, show me what it is that you are going to do so that I can figure out what it is that I need to do. So it's all about a show. Show me the administration, show me the money, show me the whatever. Right? And I'm not one to say like put my hopes and dreams of a particular direction. Like, I put my vote down. Don't get me wrong, I vote, right? I think voting in Oregon for president is pointless, right? I see no point in it at all. And then there's really no point for it if you're voting nonpartisan, because you don't even get to vote in the primaries, right? So it's like voting in Oregon is just like, it's useless, because and the reason is because we have mail-in votes and we have 3 electoral votes, right? So by the time they get our votes, once we have mailed them in and they've counted our votes, the president has already accepted it, right? The presidency, like it's already a done deal, and Oregon is still over there like, yo, hey, we haven't casted our vote yet, right? We don't know which way. Of course, it's always blue, but it doesn't matter, because at that point, it was just like, regardless of which way you go, of which way Oregon went, it wouldn't change the outcome. Right? So what's the point? There's no point. There's no point in voting for president in Oregon. And that's one of the reasons why. It's because it's always been that way ever since, I can remember. Now, voting for like local government stuff, then that would be different. Voting for laws and things like that, or new statutes or something like that. I feel a little differently about that kind of stuff. Uh, so when bad apples are voted in, it's your fault for not voting. Aha, deja vu. I didn't say I didn't vote. All right? I said it didn't matter that I voted. And it doesn't really matter what anybody voted in, right? It matters on what it is that I end up doing with my money, with my decisions, with my, business tactics and all that other stuff. That has more of an impact on the economy than who it is that I voted for. Right? And I think that would be the case with most people out there. And if they have a particular person in office, and that's going to get them to behave in a particular fashion. People who are approving of the administration are going to behave in one way, and then people who are disapproving are going to do a whole different thing. And if it was a different administration up there, they would act differently within that too, right? And it would almost happen regardless of whatever decision that was made, because I have a feeling that a lot of the decisions that would be made during those administrations would have been made the same regardless of the administration. Right? Now, how it would have been delivered to you would have been very different. Like the way that the law would have been passed and the presentation in which that it would have been delivered to the people would have come much differently depending on the administration at the time. But it would definitely have come regardless, because I don't think there's any difference between those two parties. Okay? I think a good example of that would have been Obamacare. Right? Obamacare was one of the biggest issues at the time that everybody was talking about. Republicans talked about how it was going to absolutely destroy the country, and everybody who was on the Democratic side said that Republicans just wanted old, sick people to suffer and die. Right? I mean, these were like the two arguments, that one of them was going to destroy the nation and the other one wanted old, sick people to suffer and die in misery. And these two arguments went for a long time, and it was like the debate of so many like conversations at the inside of the communities and people and all this other stuff. It was like everybody's mind, right, was talking about this damn thing. So eventually it passes, and we get this Obamacare, we get this healthcare system in, and it's all messed up, and everybody knows about it. And again, the argument is still there that it's a screwed up system, and how it needs to be repealed and replaced, not repealed, but replaced. See, before it was a bad deal altogether, but now that it's here, well, hey, it's not so bad, right? I mean, it's here. Might as well replace it with something different. Not that, right? That sucks. But what we can do with it, even though it was going to destroy the nation, is something better. So now we have it. Now it's here. Guess what? Game one, right? So the two of them fought over it, got it to happen, right? Now that it's here, it's not a matter of just getting rid of it, right? And so this is the way the game was played. You see, all the way throughout that entire thing. This is how this team operates. Like there's no real hatred between these two, right? I mean, the things that they hate the most about each other is the things that they really want passed or taken out of the nation, right? That's it. Like all the stuff that they're really kind of casual about, nobody cares. Like, yeah, that's the stuff that nobody's. But the things that they really want, they get really frustrated and mad about, right? And then you can see it, the debates happen, and then they take place. Anyway. It really feels the expansion of the U.S. debt has accelerated. Only the upper middle class has money, and they are starting to tighten their wallets. Yeah, Jesse. I mean, I totally agree, because there's a separation between the rich and the poor that takes place, and this is going to continue until the inevitable collapse happens. How far out, who knows? But it's part of the expansion of the money system in the way that it goes down. So long as you have new money coming in, you're going to have a continual separation between the rich and the poor. Now, I have to think about this when, just the idea of that the upper middle class has money, right? What you have is like people are saying like the middle class is disappearing, but that's not really disappearing. It's the separation that's happening. I mean, the middle class is there. They don't, like, the wedge between the two is so wide that middle class isn't concentrated into an area that you can see it, right? Because that separation wasn't so dramatic before. There was a concentration of middle class that you could say, hey, this is it right here. But now that is so diluted from the span of what it is that is middle class, right? Like in some areas, middle class might be, a family that earns $65,000. Like, I mean, if you're in a really low income community or something like that, that might be a crap load of money for you. But you earn $65,000 in Astoria, Oregon, and you're going to barely be cutting it, because that's not that much money here, right? Especially if you have family and kids and all that other stuff, then it's really going to be hard, right? So this is like, the issues that you're going to end up facing depending on the location that you're at. But ultimately, the separation between the rich and the poor is growing, and that's what's causing the feeling of the middle class disappearing. People are going to be middle class, right? There is always going to be a middle class of people out there. And now, if it's the middle class that comes from a typical day job, no, that ain't going to happen anymore. There was a time that it did. So that aspect of it has disappeared. But the middle class is still there. Those people, now have a day job and a side hustle, and their wife, has a career inside of it, and there's all kinds of other money coming in, and this is what's making the middle class for them. Right? Is that they don't have just a regular typical day job that's giving them the day job or giving them the middle class aspect of life. They have so many other things that are going on because there's so many other things that are now available, right? You think about it, if you have a job working at McDonald's, it's probably not going to pay for the apartment, right? I mean, it could, depending on where you're at, but most likely it's probably not going to do very well. And if you do have an apartment, that's the only thing you're going to have from it. But if you have McDonald's and you're selling stuff online, well, now you can, maybe afford that apartment and a car payment, depending on how much you can sell online. So now your income is doing so much better because you have this ability to do things online that weren't necessarily available to people, say, 20, 30 years ago, right? See, this is the view change that we have to look at. The new money that comes in separates the rich from the poor. That separation, that wedge, is growing wider, so there's a lot of space in there, right? To be middle class. The poor is way down here, the rich is way the hell up here, and there's a trickling of all kinds of people in between. All right, another super chat. Let's go check that one out. All right. Elijah, is that what it is? $4.99. Your blood was turned into a commodity with Obamacare. Yeah. I don't know. Like, again, a lot of people looked at Obamacare as majorly changing their life. Like, so all these people talked about all this insurance money and stuff that they had to pay out and all this kind of change to their life and craziness that had happened out there, And so I looked at that and I'm like, wow, man, people are really talking about this stuff. All right. Now, me at the time, zero change, zero impact on my life. You know why? Because I didn't have insurance at the time, right? And I was making such a small amount of income, it didn't change my taxes any. Right? In fact, during that time, I was getting, the earned income credit for having the child and stuff like that, for having kids. So, like, tax day was payday for me. I didn't pay taxes. I got paid on those days. But I wasn't insured. I didn't have the health insurance. So I didn't pay insurance. And I didn't, like, none of that stuff affected me. None of it. Like, I listened to people talk about how much their insurance went up and all this other stuff and how the policy changed or, all these things that had happened out there. And I was just like, well, not me. And nothing happened to me, And so I like, again, it's just like, how much involvement of government do you have in your life? How much involvement do you have of a third party claim in your life? That would be a huge question that I would ask. There's, like I said, there was a time in my life where I didn't really have anything going on as far as, like, I had the basic stuff. Like, I had a day job, so I paid a W-2, right? I had a W-2 filled out, but I didn't carry a cell phone. I very rarely used a bank account. I only used it to pay my bills out of convenience, but I didn't really have, like, a debit card. I used cash for everything. I didn't have any kind of online presence whatsoever. Like, none, And so, like, this is the way that I lived for a very long time because I was trying to stay away from the government aspect of things and being an intrusion in my life. And once I realized that, man, if you're going to live that way, you're going to have a very difficult time trying to function and be prosperous and profitable and all that other stuff that goes with it. And then when Edward Snowden came out and says, hey, man, they track you on your cell phones, and everybody believed it, I was like, cool, my protest is over. I got a cell phone, started doing videos, and started making money online. Yeah. And that's how, like, the difference in the way people look at society now. Like, what is it you're planning on doing? I mean, if you're going to work at, I would love to just work at the lumberyard and have all the things that I have going on in my life right now, right? Like, I would love to be able to go and do my 9-to-5 job and say that, man, that is enough. That is enough for all of it. And then do whatever the hell I wanted after that. Go and do whatever I wanted with my kids and do, and vacation and do all the other stuff. I would love for that to be the case. It's not the case. It never will be. I don't care how much I wish and dream and hope and and anticipate the next administration can provide that for me. It's not going to happen, right? Not going to take place. I have to do the videos. I have to call the YouTube. I have to do the side hustles. I have to do all that other stuff if I'm going to have all these things, right? And there's nobody else I can blame for that except for myself, if whether I have it or don't have it. Right? I own my own. I own my home, and I have ONHOA to myself. Let's cruise down here. Larry, what do your protest was over with the cell phone? Oh, it's because I was telling people, like, at the time I was a big conspiracy theorist. You have to think, like, I knew the government was doing all this tracking and tracing and doing all this other stuff, and people weren't really listening to me, and they, like, I don't know, I guess, like, when I tried to explain it to them, they wouldn't want to hear it, right? And I was like, man, the cell phone is part of it. It's like, this is the biggest part of it, is that they're tracking you through this thing right here. And everybody said, no, they're not. And I said, okay, that's it. I said, I'm not going to do anything that they could possibly track me by out of consciousness. Just saying, I'm going to consciously try and do things that are outside of that particular view. So I knew I couldn't carry a cell phone, and I knew I would have to use cash on most of my personal purchases on the things that I did on my daily life. So I wouldn't purchase gas with a debit card. I would only use my debit card for purchases out of, like, that were convenience, like paying insurance or renting a car or a hotel, if those kind of things were taking place. Then I would end up using one of my cards or something like that. But if I could use cash, I would on pretty much everything I was doing. And that was my protest. I just didn't want to be tracked because of the privacy issues that I knew were happening out there, that they were tracking us, everybody, by. And at the time, I had, like, this really, government had this devious plan, but ultimately it was for advertising, right? That's what they want to do, is they want to know where you are, what you're doing, what you're thinking about, so they can sell you stuff. That's what it's all about, really. Right? So anyway, that was my protest. And then once Edward Snowden came out, I'm like, well, cool. And man, like, I wish I had Facebook so I could connect with other people. Like, I'm, a pretty social person in my opinion. And so I was just like, I'd hear people talking at the bar about Facebook and connecting with old friends and stuff like that. And I thought, man, that was really cool. I would like to do something like that as well. So I started getting, started playing around on, the internet, and started doing a lot more research into stuff. And, like, it was weird how it was that I was actually able to, because I got the internet when I bought the house. It was almost at the exact same time. And I didn't really start diving into, like, theories and ideas of economy and government and other stuff until, like, I don't know, until I started losing my job, right? Because the great financial crisis kicked in, and there was all this, like, recession kicking across the nation. But that same year, here in the Pacific Northwest, we got hit with a storm of, like, hurricane magnitude. It blew over and knocked over every tree and knocked the roof off of just about every house. And it kept the economy going here for years. Like, the rebuild took a very long time. There was so much destruction that had taken place during that. So really, like, the recession was postponed until, like, almost 2 years after everybody else was just, like, talking about how devastating it was across the nation. Our particular area was still doing quite well from, I'm assuming, from the insurance money and stuff like that was coming in and, keeping things, moving. But that eventually came to an end too, and then those jobs were gone. All right, what time is it? We're an hour into this. I'm not sure how long we're going to go for today. I just wanted to come out and hang out with you guys for a little bit. Benny, what do you have here? Simon thought they were tracking him. No, I knew they were tracking me. Just the reasonings that they were tracking me, I was wrong. See, I was still right that they were tracking me, but for the reasons that they were tracking me were wrong. It doesn't matter. They were still tracking you, right? you know. So again, it's all about the meaning you give things at the time, right? Now I don't give it that meaning that they're tracking me for, like, scary aspects of life. They're doing it because it's even more scary. They're trying to advertise. All right. They're dropping and coking had you under paranoid. All right, what joy they needed to be. I know Benny is just like, he is just the troll of all trolls. Eh? All right. You could have bought a burner phone. Yeah, and I would use, like, I was really big into using encryption. So I learned a lot about encryption and how to send encrypted messages. Learned about the Tor browser, learned how to use Tor. Tor sucks. Tor's like, you can't watch videos or anything. Like, it's okay for if you want to do like communications or something like that, then that's pretty cool. But for the most part, Tor is just too slow and it's cumbersome and it's not a very good browser. I mean, at least when I was using it, it wasn't. Um, and so I don't know. It's just the way I was. All right, 338 million people. They don't care to track everyone. All right. Oh, let's see here. Membership is worth every penny. Thank you, Deja Vu. Yeah, we are going to do the. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I see that you did the membership up again. Yeah, we're gonna do membership video. Like I said, guys, I just wasn't really feeling like I was prepared to quite talk about that particular document because it's huge. It's actually 48-page working paper. We're not going to go through the entire thing, but there was quite a bit involved inside of it, and so I wanted to kind of go through and reread through some of it that I thought was going to be more prudent, because you got to think this is the Federal Reserve's working paper talking about like what it would be like to bring a gold standard into the current economy, or at least that's kind of the idea behind this, which I find quite interesting because just like anything out there, they don't talk about something they aren't anticipating or could anticipate possibly being in the future. Like, they don't make up like, let's do a working paper on what it would be like if aliens came down and decided that like, they don't do stuff like that, right? They talk about serious issues and what could possibly come from those things. And so anyway, I thought that paper was pretty good. And it is quite long. Like I said, I think it's 48 pages. And so uh okay. Okay, Brody here. Hey, Simon, what caused the 2008 financial crisis? I think I understand it, but you can probably explain it in a way that is going to clarify things. Okay, so in the great financial crisis, this is really what ended up taking place is that, and this is good because it really has more to deal with like our title here today too, about the real economy and the financial economy, right? And so you have like you have a regulatory system, right? That provides loans out there to people. So you have like a bank and their loan officers, and they come up with this idea of what it is that they want to, have for loans that they give out to people. And so this is really kind of how it goes down, simply explained. Now, that's from like a bank. Then you have like mortgage lenders. Okay? Now, mortgage lenders are like the private money. Now, when they lend out money, they're not actually trying to lend out to have a long-term loan from you, right? What they're trying to do is issue out that loan so that they could take the loan itself, the IOU, and then sell it, right? And so that's the whole point of that mortgage lender, is to find people who they can get money from to get you the loan so they can take that and sell it off to somebody who's going to take that loan and then either put it on their balance sheet or package it up into what would be called the mortgage-backed security. And that's generally how most loans end up going through, is that you have this private entity kind of in the middle of it, this mortgage lender. You saw them on TV, like all those people who are like, blasting like mortgage loans, on TV. Most of those people are like the private mortgage lenders that are out there. Even though they seem very much out there and in your face and everything, they're not secretive, right? But that's part of the shadow banking system. And so a lot of times when we hear that shadow banking system or, whatever, we think kind of shady banking system. That's not it. The shadow banking system is operating in the shadows of the regulatory system, right? So this shadow banking system is acquiring or distributing or producing loans, right? More, let's just use mortgage loans, for example, in order to then sell those things off. This is how most of them are operating. In order to sell those things off into a package security for somebody for some other investor to buy. Okay, I know this is kind of complicated, but it's kind of important to understand that kind of stuff, because what ended up happening is that these mortgage lenders out there were producing mortgage-backed securities, right? So through this mortgage market of these private entities, the shadow banking system or whatever, was producing mortgages and then putting them into mortgage-backed securities, and these mortgages that were going in there were very toxic, right? Now, this was in the subprime mortgages that they supposedly thought that these things were at, but it was much bigger and much broader than that. Now, there was a great movie, oh shit, why can't I think of it right now? The Big Short, right? Where they actually talk about this in detail, like this whole concept of everything that I'm saying right now. And they talk about it in detail. And in fact, a lot of these brokers and investment and financial guys who understood this market a little bit better were going to like right down to the boots on the ground level to find out what it was that was taking place within the mortgage market that was creating so many of these mortgages out there, this mortgage-backed security market. Everybody was like, seemed to see, saw this thing growing. Like it was a housing market boom like nobody had really ever anticipated because of the availability of these mortgages, right? But these mortgages really shouldn't have been produced in the first place. But because so many of them are out there and moving that housing market, now you have people who are building homes, you have people who are flipping homes, you have all this activity taking place within the real estate market because the availability of these mortgages that were being produced at the time. Well, so long as everything's on the increase, right? So long as the homes can be flipped, so long as the mortgages can be flipped, all this goes well until the moment that it churns, right? And now the moment that the liquidity has an issue, all the toxic assets out there that were created then start to be exposed for what they are. So now when you think about it, like in that movie The Big Short, they use an example of a stripper who had purchased like 3 or 4 homes. Like these mortgage lenders out there were like saying, oh yeah, no problem, we can get you these mortgages. And they were able to create this mortgage and then sell it within days that moved off into some other security out there. And so they didn't care. They were just like producing as many mortgages as they could because hell, they get a commission off of all this stuff, right? And so now, as these mortgages kept getting created and filling up the mortgage-backed security market, all of a sudden the liquidity issues kicked in, and now these mortgages are starting to collapse, right? These things are not getting paid. There's so many of them out there that are toxic, right? Because they should never have gone to this person to begin with, especially somebody like, a stripper who could probably afford one, but not three, right? And if the renters aren't paying, then guess what? The mortgages aren't getting paid. And since it wasn't good qualified mortgage lender or mortgages to begin with, now you have these toxic assets that are absolutely crashing the financial system. This is where the government ended up stepping in. Well, in a couple of different ways, right? Ultimately, those mortgages themselves had to get purchased, right, by the Federal Reserve. They ended up taking these toxic mortgages and putting it on their balance sheet. And this was like probably one of the biggest, probably one of the biggest debacles within the financial system that was so devious in some people's understanding of it. Like there was some people who saw this coming so well that they bought the insurance policies on those mortgage-backed securities out there that were called credit default swaps. called credit default swaps. And this is really where The Big Short, or the movie The Big Short, starts to get really intriguing in it, because these credit default swaps, these are insurance policies against those mortgages or against those mortgage-backed securities. And if those things start to fail, the credit default swaps kick in. Well, now part of the failure portion of it is the credit rating of those mortgage-backed securities. So if the credit rating falls to a particular level, the insurance policies kick in, right? So these people out there who saw this housing market failure coming, knowing that these people were not going to be able to pay all these mortgages and that they were going to start failing, they went out and started buying up a lot of these credit default swaps, knowing that this event was going to be taking place, right? That these mortgages weren't going to get paid and that the credit rating of these mortgage-backed securities was going to fall. So they bought insurance policies against that, right? Saying that if they fall to this particular level, this particular credit rating, then the insurance policy kicks in and these people who bought it get made whole again by getting paid out. So now the moment's coming, right? The failure's happening, the great financial crisis is kicking in, and these mortgage-backed securities are starting to fail, but they're not giving it the lower credit rating, right? And so, like, these people are flipping out. It was just like, what's going on here? See, now this is really where the manipulation is that though credit rating of those mortgage-backed securities should have fallen dramatically, kicking in the insurance policies on those credit default swaps. But because the credit rating agencies have competition within themselves, they basically say, no, we have to give it this higher credit rating, because if we don't, they're just going to go down the street and get that higher credit rating from those people down there, right? So it wasn't the real credit rating that was being applied to these things, which would normally have kicked in these credit default swaps, all because the competition down the road would say, hey, if we did that, then they would just give it that higher credit rating. So this is really how this financial system operates. This is why it's so corrupted, why it's so, like, to me, like, I look at that and I say, this is part of the game. Like, this is not something that they're going to change or do anything about, right? And now, I guess in the end, when you think about this, those credit default swaps did go up in dramatic value, right? Because now you have, like, an instrument of value within itself. Like, if you own the insurance policy, you can sell that insurance policy to somebody else, right? That credit default swap. So even though they weren't kicking in as far as paying out the big dollars, the value of them themselves shot way up, as everybody knew the credit rating of these things were not what everybody said it was. And so even the insurance policy itself, the value of it went up. So a lot of these guys who had foreseen the whole housing debacle, the craziness that was taking place, and that there was going to be this huge dramatic, crashing of mortgages out there, and how these guys were able to buy an insurance policy, even though they didn't get paid out on that insurance policy, they did get paid out quite well on the selling of those credit default swaps, just back into the market anyway, just because of the credit rating falling on those assets that they were covering. So, did I get all that right? I don't know. There's probably a bunch of stuff that I missed, but that's kind of that was it in a nutshell. There's a lot there, huh? See, this is one of the things that we have to be worried about when it comes to, like, the collateralized loan obligations, because it was those mortgage-backed securities that really drug down the financial market. Like, all of a sudden, there's all these toxic mortgages out there that are just crashing the system, and interest rates are going to just go through the roof on mortgages if all these toxic assets are existing out there in the system, right? So we think about, like, what's happening with a lot of companies out there is that the credit rating of these companies are so diminished that they can't even sell their junk bonds. So they go and get loans from the banks. Well, this wouldn't make sense when you think, man, if their credit rating is so bad that they can't even sell a junk bond, why would any bank or any entity out there loan money to this business? Well, if they take that loan, it's an instrument that they can then sell off to somebody who is going to put it in a package of other loans, business loans that are out there, and call it a collateralized loan obligations, right? They can dice this thing up then sell portions of it off that have a higher credit rating. Now, if you understand how these securities work, as the money pours in, the top entity, the top tranche, I should say, not entity, but the top tranche gets paid first. So if you buy into that particular investment, then it's going to have a higher credit rating, and you're going to be able to generally anticipate that you're going to get your money paid, right? Even though it's going to be a lower interest that you get on it, the security of it is much higher. Now, this can then be purchased by insurance companies or pension funds or anybody else out there because of that higher credit rating, even though all the components that went into it would not have the availability to be invested in by these other entities because it doesn't have the credit rating available to them, right? But if you combine it into the security and then cut it up and give it a higher, make all the payments go to one particular group first, then that particular group first can have a higher credit rating and then also have the ability to purchase it. And so now you think about it, if there was any significant downturn in the economy, most of these businesses who already suck enough that they can't sell a junk bond are probably not going to make these loan payments. And if they don't make the loan payments, what ends up happening? Well, they end up defaulting on that. It's defaulting on the people, the pension funds, the insurance companies who are buying into the security. But they're not buying into security, they're buying into crap, right? But it was just delivered in such a way that it had a higher security aspect to it. All right, moving on. You guys like talking to me? All right, thanks again. I have follow-up question, if you don't mind. As I understand it, the problem was addressed by the central banks by printing up a bunch of money to purchase the toxic loans. Yeah, so ultimately they put the mortgages, those toxic loans, on their balance sheet, right? And it took them off of the big banks' balance sheet. So now if the big banks had those toxic assets sitting on there, then their credit rating would be, just like anybody else's. If you got a bad loan, or bad asset on your balance sheet, that's going to give you a lower credit rating. So they took all these things off of the big bank's balance sheet and put it onto their balance sheet and held on to these mortgage-backed securities for, however long, and cleared up the banking system, the financial system, to then be more free within their credit rating systems to then provide loans back into the households and businesses to be able to do that. So that was the big bailout, right? And after that, that's when like regulatory systems of like being able to get a loan became very stringent. Like a lot of people don't realize that. And that it didn't become easier to get a loan, it became harder, right? In fact, you think about it, it became harder to get a house. There's never been a time when it became easier to get a house, ever, right? It always became harder. Now, you think about it, is it harder from the sense in which that it used to be? See, there was a time when it was easy to come up with the down payment and the acquisition of a home. Like you could actually acquire things. Now, it's hard to come up with that down payment, so they had to make it easier by lowering the ability to put the down payment. Is that the ability to get a house easier, or is that harder? Right? See, to me, that's harder. If it was the ability to buy a plot of land and stick frame a home together over the course of a summer, that, although physically demanding and probably, a little bit harder for a lot of people out there who don't have the skills, but is that harder or easier today to pay a contractor to do it with all the permitting and issues and stuff like that you have to go through in order to build a home, right? See, it was easier before, it's harder now. It keeps getting harder and harder to get a home, no matter how you look at it. There's no way, there's nothing in the world that the government can do that is going, that the government or the banking system, there's nothing that they can do within the financial system to make it easier for people to get a home. There's nothing, absolutely nothing, right? The only thing that can be done is to try and create a supply and demand balance. The only way to do that is to either make it so that there's less demand, which isn't going to happen, or you provided the ability to have more supply. The only way to have more supply is to lower regulations, create investment, right? To incentivize. These are the things that will create more of a supply of homes. But there is no way that you can take a current supply of homes and a current supply of demand and create a situation in which it's going to be easier for the people within that demand to get the homes, because there's only a certain amount of them. Not everybody's going to get there, right? So in order to make the homes cheaper, you have to bring in more supply, because the demand isn't going anywhere. The demand is going to be constant, if not growing. Not your problem. Thank you so much for the $4.99. How do you think everything will play out economically? Take wild guesses. Keep it fun. Bless your family. Beautiful day in Oregon. It is a beautiful day in Oregon. Um, how do I think everything will play out economically? I don't know, man. Like, I guess it'd have to be a little bit more specific than that. Like, how's it everything going to play out for me personally, or how's it going to play out for, like, interest rates, or how? I mean, I guess there's so much to look at. Like, I mean, again, like, I look at the economy as not as a singular thing. It's so much that I am involved, that I'm trying to position myself from, or towards, or with, um like, I don't change anything about my viewpoints or what it is that I plan on doing based on administrations. A lot of people will. Like, their entire economic outlook will change based on the administration out there. So, will that affect how it is that I end up interacting with the economy? Yeah, I guess it will, right? But it's going to depend on what it is that those people end up doing. And, me personally, I don't look at anything being good or bad. So I don't think about, like, a recession being a bad thing, and I don't think about the overexpansion and quantitative easings and all that other stuff of being a bad thing. I don't think anything about it like that. So, what is the outcome going to be? Well, you're probably going to end up having a situation where the Federal Reserve doesn't do much. They're probably just going to sit on their hands, watch the balance sheet unwind for a while, keep the interest rates somewhat where they are, because even if they did change them, it wouldn't make any difference for 6 months to a year or more. So I would think that it's more going to be about, like, what it is that they communicate through the mainstream media. You can see a lot of that within the articles that are written. When you see a Fed official in a news interview, like, through the mainstream publications, through the corporate medias, that is the credible threats that they are giving out there, right? And so you're going to hear a lot of talk about how it is that they can wait and see, or maybe they might be even hit hikes or whatever. All that stuff, that's all to try and guide the market's perception so that they'll behave in a particular way. Like, if the market starts to crash, then all they'll say, like, they'll just put out a bunch of Fed speak out there on the mainstream media about how there's going to be all this massive interest rate cuts, right? And they will have economists come out and use things like the dot plot map to prove their point about how the Federal Reserve is going to go into significant rate cuts here in the next 6 months. When people believe this stuff, right, when they actually believe it, then it starts to move back into the real economy and people start behaving in that fashion. The Federal Reserve won't have to really do anything, right? All they have to do is just put the perception of that anticipation into the people. Okay? And if they communicate that clearly, and they can do that well enough, and they can give it a long distance time horizon to it, so they don't really have to act, they can just communicate how it is that they're going to act, then people will behave in whatever fashion that is that they want them to. Right? And again, so, like, what is it that I see coming to the future? I see that probably until the end of the year, they're going to continue to have an inflation. Like, they're not going to adjust anything so long as inflation is slightly above 2%, right? Because that's what they said over and over and over again, that appropriate monetary policy would have inflation slightly above 2% for some time. We have gone over this so many times. Like, like, yesterday's video was almost communicating nothing but that, right? Was just that theory alone. And so if they keep inflation, and this is the thing, like, no matter what you hear, like, to step back for a minute and just kind of blink out everything else that you hear. If inflation remains above 2% until the end of the year, just slightly above 2% for the end of the year, right, then you know that they are achieving their monetary policy. That's the appropriate monetary policy, regardless of they screwed up, they don't know what they're doing, they did it for election purposes, they blah 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 blah, all this stuff that you're going to hear from it. If that inflation remains slightly above 2%, and we go all the way to the end of the year, that is the appropriate monetary policy that the Federal Reserve was looking for and that they had communicated to us over the past 5 years. All right, how they got there and the communication style in which it happened and what it is that we believed and what we thought that was going to be taking place and all that other stuff doesn't really matter, right? So long as they achieved what it was that they were anticipating, and that is that inflation that was slightly above 2%, because that was the appropriate monetary policy for some time. And then once they review that monetary policy and then they dictate what that is to us, and they will tell us exactly what that is, we will know better if they plan on going back to a target, if they're backward-looking inflation, forward-looking inflation. Who knows? We have no idea what monetary policy is going to be here in the next, 10 months or whatever it's going to be from now. Less than that, 7 or 8 months. All right, moving on. Hey, not your problem again. Thank you so much, man. I love how you cut out all the theatrics. Yeah. Well, there's there's so there's so much out there, right? I mean, there's so much to be looked at. There is so much evidence of reason. And this is the thing, like we can look at anything. And this is and it's funny because like if you get triggered by something, like somebody hits you with this particular thing, like and it's very triggering, right? And it hits you with all this emotion and thought, and you're like, oh my God, oh, frustrating, or oh my God, this is amazing, or whatever. When you get hit with that trigger, and then all of a sudden there's confirmation of it, boom, 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 factual things that start to come in, that will then set you into belief. Right? So if they can trigger something and then reiterate it with facts over and over again, this trigger that they hit on you, right? It will turn into a belief no matter what. This is how brainwashing works. You can do it to yourself. I mean, it's just like, people do it all the time when they start diving into conspiracy theories or whatever, they'll hit this like, oh my God, and then they'll like research and they're like getting all this information and they're like these facts, and the next thing you know, like the whole world's coming after them or something, right? So you can do it to yourself, but this is really how like a lot of the operation within the mainstream media, the corporate media works, right? Is they trigger you and then they hit you with facts, boom, 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 so that you will believe a particular way. And what I like to do is try to eliminate like the feelings, the emotions, the beliefs out of it, and just look at things in a lot more of a logical sense, right? And that's very difficult within itself because nothing is logical, right? Everything is counterintuitive, especially when it comes to trying to understand the financial markets, because those things are definitely not what anybody would ever anticipate them being. But if you could take the emotional aspect out of it and say, okay, well, it's not the New World Order coming after me because there's plenty of evidence of that taking place, right? I don't need to find the evidence of it. If I look for it, it will be there, right? Guaranteed. Right? But then again, I can also find the belief and find the meaning behind it that is not incorporating the New World Order, right? And I can see that there is a difference inside of these two beliefs in at it. Both of them completely factual, right? Like no lies being told here, right? But the meaning that you have behind it is going to be very different. The belief that you are giving it is going to be very different. The outcome that comes from that will be very different, right? And so it's important, right? The way that you receive this information. That's why, like, one of the it's some of the reasons why I like following the mainstream media kind of stuff. Like I read a lot of articles, that talk about it, and I do take in some of the opinions of other people, and I think, well, that's considering something I hadn't thought of. But most of the time, what I am looking for is something that actually takes my information that I have found, words it in a way that is better than what I can word it, and then dismantles it for incorrect. Now, I can't find that, right? And that's what I am looking for out there. And because generally when I look at somebody else's argument, that's what I try to do. I look at their argument, I say, okay, this is what you're trying to say here. I'm going to not only restate it in a way that is better, superior to what you're arguing it, but then I'm going to dismantle it after I'm done, right? Because that's how I like to debate, right? And because not only if I can argue your point better than you, then you're not going to be able to argue my point, right? So if that's the case, right, then generally speaking, most people are probably going to end up being in a much better understanding of the information that they have, what it is that they feel that's going on, and they're probably going to look out there and say, man, everybody else out there is either got some parts of it right, but they're missing all these other aspects of it. So that's really important to do. Like, when I read articles, I really look at it as just like, okay, this is the argument that they are giving, right? And I'm going to try and argue that point better than they can. Right? And sometimes I can do it, sometimes I can't. Sometimes their points, aren't too shabby, and it's just like, geez, I never really thought about it that way. I'm going to have to incorporate that idea because I can't argue it any better. you know uh, let's see here. I'm just cruising back up a little ways here. Does unemployment have to rise before the Fed will do the interest rates? Will drop the interest rates? Yeah, I believe that will be the case. I believe the Federal Reserve is looking for unemployment to rise. Now, as much as a lot of people probably disagree with this, it's the unemployment aspect of things that the Federal Reserve had always used to try and manipulate the inflation. So if they wanted inflation to move up or down, they would try and create or basically destroy jobs. And with the creation or destruction of jobs, what you could do is you can increase or decrease the amount of consumption that is happening out there. So if you can increase or decrease the amount of consumption that is happening by the amount of people who are employed, then what you're going to find is that the added increase in consumption or decrease will start having the inflationary pressures that the Federal Reserve is looking for or not looking for, depending on which direction they are going for. A lot of times it is just based on consumer. Like they're saying, okay, they want the unemployment to remain constant and just have the consumer spending less. Like I think this is probably the argument that a lot of people would have out there. And a lot of times this is what you're going to hear coming from not only the mainstream media, but maybe even from like the Fed itself, right? They won't necessarily talk about how it is that they're trying to create an unemployment scenario to decrease consumption. They just talk about decreasing of consumption out there, but then they don't really talk about it. The reasoning that they're going to get that is because the unemployment is going to rise, right? So again, like when you look at the Federal Reserve, they generally don't talk in this kind of combination. Like unemployment rise, lowering the consumption, therefore, adjusting the inflation model. They don't talk about it like that. They talk about it in two different things. They talk about the unemployment being one thing and then consumption being another, right? And even though it takes one to make the other happen, right? But again, it's just like in their economic models and the way that they perceive it, these are two different things that are happening there. But if they want one to act on the other, then they have to have this particular thing happening. Most people just look at like the consumption aspect of it as like the raising or lowering interest rates will then adjust the consumption of things, not really anticipating that raising and lowering of interest rates is what's actually causing the investment into business that then would create the unemployment or create the jobs to lower unemployment, right? Lowering of interest rates creates the investment to go into business that would then have the hiring that would lower unemployment. That hiring and then the lowering of unemployment would then have the jobs, the new money coming into the system that would create the new consumption that would then create the inflationary scenario that they are looking for, right? It's not just off of I mean, don't get me wrong, the consumption, the buying and selling of things, within the direct economy is part of it, but the long-term anticipation that the Federal Reserve is truly looking for is what's going into that business aspect of things. How many jobs are being created from the lower interest rates due to the investment into business? Very important to know the difference in that. Because most of the people are surface level on that, thinking that it's just a matter of the consumption that has taken place due to the interest rates and the capability of the buyer. And that's not it, right? I mean, that's part of it, but that's not it. It goes all the way back into the business part of things and how many people are going to get hired or fired. All right. Moving on here. We've got quite a few people watching. 255 people with 154 likes. Go hit that like button. We'll get more people to join in on this chat. I'm probably not going to be out here too much longer. It's 1:35 now. Or 1:35. An hour and 35 minutes into this, so we're probably just not going to give it much more than another 10, 15 minutes or so. All right. I said that before, but I once asked George Gammon why he likes Gucci loafers. I don't know. Slipping on a little something, getting the party started early. What? All right, let's see here. How can you be so nonchalant about the Fed causing a lot of people to be unemployed? Is the pain going to be short or something? Oh, how can I be nonchalant about it? Oh, yeah. Probably because I don't give it a lot of emotional feelings towards it, because I know how bad the situation truly is for most people. And if I was to talk about it, it would probably be some of the most depressing stuff that you would ever hear, right? And I don't like talking about it. I don't even really like thinking about it that much. So to hear about how somebody is going to lose their job, or talk about how somebody's going to lose their job and be nonchalant about that, is really pretty mild comparatively to what they're truly going to find out what's going to come to them in the future if they truly were to understand what it is that's going on, right? I mean, I'm just trying to at least give an idea of what it is that is happening within the monetary system, so that you can best position yourself due to what's happening within that monetary system, right? Not fiscal policies or anything else that's going on, not the government stuff, which has a big important part of it, right? Especially if you give it importance into your life. But I'm talking about the monetary policy itself, what it is that the Federal Reserve is doing. What they are doing then has you in a position in which that you are going to have to interact with the rest of the people out there as far as the transactions you do, whether that's interest rates or, regulations on bank loans or whatever it is that's happening out there. That is the important feature of this whole thing that's happening, because it is the most impactful part of your life that you actually can do something about, right? You can't do anything about the laws that are out there. You can vote, you can try and spread your feelings about it, or your ideas or whatever. Nothing you can really do. But when it comes to the monetary system, there is a lot that happens inside of this. There's constant changes, and information is very limited, and it's very manipulated, and it's very propagandized. I mean, I don't know how else to explain it inside of that. But to me, like, the unemployment rising and falling is a very small consequence to what could be faced from all this other stuff that's going on out there. Again, right? Take the information for what it is, entertainment purposes only, really. But I don't hesitate when it comes to trying to find where it is that I can get new money coming in, right? Because it's only going to get worse, right? If you want to be in a position in which that, your day job is going to provide you with everything you need, and then you can go and drink beer for the rest of your day and just do this for 40 years, and then you're going to have this awesome life at the end of it. Good luck, right? Good luck. It's not going to work like that. Like, and to me, like, I have no chance of that, because I'm 40 years old and was screwed up already at the time. And I'm trying to figure it out now. I'm 47, still trying to figure it out, right? I don't have time to waste. I don't have, like, the ability to do that. So I have to put forth too much effort, right? That's what I really kind of call it. It's too much effort in order to try and make things happen here. But yeah, people are going to lose their jobs, and this is how it's done. And this is how the Federal Reserve looks at it. And it's not up to me to have a feeling of good or bad about that. It's just the way it is. All right. Oh, Benny, you are so entertaining, Simon. Thank you. Let's hit the road. I am so ready to road dog and spread with you, or speed with you. Yeah, man, it sounds fun. I need something to sell. I need a book or a course to sell, and I'm working on that course. I'm getting better at it. I just don't have it completed yet, and I don't have everything I need for it, but I'm getting there. I hate Bitcoin, but even I bought some. Yeah, of course you did. And I have gold in a safe deposit box for my wife when I die. That's good for you, man. That's exactly what you should do. Simon, do you have a Roth IRA? No, but I wish I did. Like, I've considered it many times. I have a 401k with work. I have my own stock portfolio that I'm kind of building, just through an online broker. I have kind of things like that, but I don't have a Roth IRA, and I really should do it too, is have that Roth IRA. What I really should do is set one up for Freddie, for my boy, and get him going into one. So those of aren't familiar with Roth IRA, basically it's your retirement portfolio that you contribute to, and you hold on to it until, I think, what is it, 65 or something like that, or 62. I think there's a particular age. Everything that it has accumulated until that age comes out tax-free on the other end of it, but you have to wait till you're that old to get it. So for somebody who is young, like my boy, Freddie, compounding interest, or being able to take something that has that compounding interest effect to it, where you can just keep rolling it back over and over and over again into the same thing and build it all the way up for that many years, you'll come out the other side of it so well. Like, you're going to do so well on it. Like, time, youth, and that time that the youth have for taking advantage of compounding interest, excuse me, is probably one of the greatest things that a young person has. Is probably the it's almost as if it's the gift, right? It's a gift that they have no clue that they have, that older people, like, by the time you're 47 years old, you just don't get it the same. You just will never be able to take advantage of it in the same way, right? So being young, the younger you are, the more I try to encourage people to take advantage of the compounding interest, to roll. That's like, take a compounding interest calculator. Literally, like, if you're 18 years old right now and you're watching this thing, like, literally take a compounding interest calculator, put in $50 a month, and put like 10% interest on that, and just roll it over for the next, well, let's see, you're 18, so go till you're 68 years old, right? So go for 50 years and see what that compounding interest calculator is going to do for you after 50 years of putting just $50 a month in. And then start increasing that $50 a month to like 55, right? Or even 60, and see what that number changes to. And you'll be amazed on what it is that time will do for you, especially if you start deducting the years. Take it from 50 years down to 48 years, or even worse, take it down to like 30 years, and see how little that number really goes to. How much it increases every year after a certain amount. It's incredible. Like, you get to a point where it's almost exponential, in which it rises. Right? This is stuff that, you just can't do if you don't have the time. And it doesn't matter. Like, say, even if you did have the time, by the time you got there, you're like, look, I did it too. You'd be like, super old man, you didn't get to use it for anything, right? Oh, great deal, right? You want to be young and be able to use that stuff, or youngish. All right. We could spread too, Simon. Yeah, right on, Betty. All right. Give a talks and take questions. Yeah, that would be cool. Just go on, talking Q&A kind of things. Don't take this the wrong way, but I'm glad that you need to do the YouTube, Simon. You've taught me a ton. If you don't have the fire under your ass to do these videos and streams, that would be a loss. Yeah, and I totally agree with you, Brody. It's one of the reasons why I don't actually play the lottery anymore. I don't buy lottery tickets, because I actually, and I mean this from the absolute truth, from the bottom of my heart, I do not want to win the lottery, because I love the path that I'm on right now. Like, if I won the lottery, I wouldn't be doing this. And if I wasn't doing this, I don't know what I would be doing, because I enjoy this. I enjoy what it's doing for me. I enjoy what it's done for my family. I enjoyed, like, the growth that I have had over the last few years. It's just incredible. Like, I can't imagine doing anything else other than this. And if I won the lottery, I think it would ruin that. Like, literally, it would ruin it, and I don't want it to be ruined. I want this to continue. Like, I love this, and this is something that I want in my life. And so I don't play the lottery, like, out of fear that I would actually win. Isn't that funny? You know, and because, I mean, it was up to hundreds of millions, like, super quadrillion of $1 billion. Like, I don't even know how much $100 million means anymore, right? That's just such an insane amount of money, right? And to think, like, what kind of path would I be on? Would I be like really trying to encourage other people to understand economics in the way that can be most useful to them from a working class position like us? Like, would I be on that path? No. I would be something totally different. I'd be blowing the money, partying, having fun. Who knows what I'd be getting into, right? This is the path that I was meant to be on. This is why I'm enjoying it. And that's why I don't buy lottery tickets. I don't play the lottery. I think Sarah buys them every once in a while, and if she won, then that would change my life too, right? So, I mean, I don't discourage her from doing it, but, I'm like, me personally, I don't look for that kind of dream. Like, this is my dream. This is what I want to do. Like, I think I could do it better, and I always feel like that's my ultimate issue, is that don't go stagnant, man. Try and do things, try to constantly grow, try to do better and be bigger and all that other stuff. So sometimes that's a little, frustrating and discouraging for me. But limits on the Roth IRA contributions are $7,000 this year. Invest in what rich people invest in. Societies collapse from the bottom up. Rich people are in stocks. Yeah. So I'm grateful that you feel it's worth the effort to do this. Oh, absolutely, Brody. Like, you know, I really, I don't even know if you realize like how much I think about YouTube and making the next video and how this monetary system, affects everything from the industry that I'm in, the lumber industry, the retail industry, to, right down to our personal lives, how it impacts society. It's just like I'm in a constant thought on all this stuff regularly. And I don't know, it's just like I can't stop it now. Wow, look at all this. Okay. I don't buy lottery tickets because it's that kind of extreme perfect place, perfect time type scenario that needs all the right conditions that can be replicated, but just happens for no reason. Eh. Hi, long time watcher, first time in the chat. Well, thank you, Ordinary Man. I appreciate the comment. Curious, send me money and I will buy you a lottery tickets. I have a penny. I have the pre-buy ritual that I use that works and involves a few unsavory things, but I've hit since I've started. All right, Simon is a good guy. I like these talks. Well, thank you. I was short the market last 2 weeks and I'm still short. I feel sorry for people who don't know the mess we're in. Would love nothing more than accompany Simon to make the life easier, Brody. We're a wholesome guy, and his love of the process is very admirable. Well, thank you, Bunny. Yeah, this is like, what was I going to do? Right? I mean, I was farming chickens. That wasn't going to do it for me. I was, trying to go to work every single day, but it's like, it's a day job, so that's not going to cut it. What are you going to do? You gotta get out there and start doing stuff. And, the biggest thing for me, I think, was just the motivation behind it was just lacking because of all the drinking I was doing. And, giving up drinking and, Sarah going through the rehabilitation herself and changing our life around just the way we were just thinking in general. It took years. It took so long, right? It's just like, even after we quit drinking, it was a long time before anything like really, like, what could I say, like, really like significant change. It wasn't until like the YouTube channel really took off that anything really significant started to happen. But, for years there after we had quit drinking, it was just like trying to just deal with the mess that we were in. It wasn't easy. What time is it? Okay. Cool. Well, guys, I think we're probably going to call it quits here. We're almost 2 hours into this live stream. It was a lot of fun hanging out with you. We have 244 people watching with 172 likes and $13.96 in super chats because you guys are always so generous with the super chats. If you won the lottery, you could buy the lumber yard as a tax write-off. Yeah, but I think that lumber, I mean, don't get me wrong, I love working the lumber industry, but I don't know if I would really necessarily want to own a lumber yard as my business. Like I would much rather be doing things like this, like YouTube, like being, doing the presentations on stage or writing books or writing courses or teaching classes or doing anything like that. I think would be more of the business aspect of things that I would want to follow because that's really what I'm into. Like I can do sales just fine. Like I enjoy doing sales and especially when they have like this dream project in mind, like that you know that beautiful deck or fence or backyard gazebo thing that they've always wanted or whatever, and they put those together and they come and show me pictures of it and they talk about how awesome it was and the experience of putting it together. That's amazing. Like that, a lot of people are like, oh man, whatever, get over it. No, that's actually like the funnest part of doing sales is somebody who comes to you and says, man, thank you for all the help and the suggestions and everything you did for making this project run as smoothly as it did. And it's just like, it's amazing here to have this now in our lives. That's a cool feeling to have. Like, I mean, it's the same kind of thing that I get from YouTube here. So, doing sales is a lot of fun, especially when things like that take place. But, it's just another job like everything else. You own and collect. You own it, collect a paycheck, and retain everybody there to keep it operating. Yeah. What if I mean, I worked for two failed lumber yards before. I mean, what if things go bad, man? It's not like it's a fun game to play every year. Do you think the next wave of layoffs, the companies will have enough for severance packages? I don't know. I mean, I guess that would depend on the company that you're working for. Now, whether or not there's like, I don't know how devastating of the layoffs there is going to be with the rise of unemployment that the Federal Reserve would probably be looking for before they would start to lower the interest rates. Because one of the things that has now started to take place, especially within a lot of the Federal Reserve talking, is that the low unemployment doesn't create the inflation scenario that they would look for. And so they can keep low unemployment forever, right? Because it doesn't create inflation. Right? Lowering unemployment, or not lowering, raising unemployment creates a deflationary scenario, right? It puts pressure on inflation, but lowering inflation doesn't, or lowering unemployment doesn't necessarily create inflation. And can be viewed back towards the end of Trump's administration. I mean, it was some of the best jobs numbers in history, and he was saying, like, even coming out of his own words, was like there's no inflation and the Fed should be printing money. Like this was coming out of Donald Trump at the end of his administration before the pandemic kicked in. So even though you had low unemployment numbers, it didn't create the inflation that the Federal Reserve would typically anticipate coming from it. Now, on the flip side of that, I think the raising of unemployment, like if that moves up and you have a high unemployment rate, that would put pressure down on inflation. So now the Federal Reserve can just sit in a position in which that they just have constant low unemployment. They will have no reason to adjust their interest rates if the unemployment stays significantly low. You see? Like this is one of the things that they've been talking about. That's one of the reasons why they changed their dual mandate, the wording on their dual mandate from like what did they say? Maximum employment to full employment or something of that nature. Like they changed their wording of it, of the way that they use. God, I wish I had the internet up and running. I'd go and look it up. But they changed the word of it, and the way I interpreted that changing was that there was a time in which that they could have a certain level of employment that would happen in the economy, right? They had this neutral employment rate. And they still do have a neutral employment rate, but it's really low. right? So, but even still with the neutral employment rate, the idea behind it is that the, let me see if I can say this right. Uh, I'm, sorry guys, I kind of lost my train of thought on what it was I was trying to explain on that. So I guess the idea behind it now, or before, was that if they had this neutral interest rate, they could adjust the unemployment rate either above or below that neutral interest, or the neutral unemployment rate. Because if they were neutral, it wouldn't accommodate nor restrict the economy. The inflation would just stay constant, right? But because that has fallen to as low as it has, now there is no real use of the neutral interest rate or the neutral unemployment rate, because now adjusting the unemployment rate significantly below it is no longer an effective tool. Okay. So now, instead of looking at it as full employment, meaning like if they were at full employment, they would be at neutral, because anything above that would then, would start to create an inflationary scenario, or anything below that would create a deflationary scenario, under that would create an inflationary scenario. So that would be full, right? And that would be like their constant 2% target would be achieved. Now they can have maximum unemployment, or maximum employment, which would take the unemployment level incredibly low, knowing that that low unemployment level will not create the inflation scenario that would typically come from a low unemployment environment. Okay, so now they can have employment at maximum levels constantly, right? Instead of just being full. Like this is full. Like if you have a cup, right, and you fill it all the way up to the very top, then it starts spilling out, right? There's more of it, but it just keeps spilling out, right, because it's full. But if you have a maximum amount, this is all the water we have, right? This is it. Okay. Well, then that could be the maximum amount. It's not a matter of like filling up the cup to this point. We can't go any more than that because it would start creating issues. You can have maximum employment. Like everybody go to work. It doesn't matter. Like, everybody have a job. It doesn't matter because it's not going to create the inflationary scenario that they are looking for. That's the wording change that they had, right? Before they would want to adjust it. Now they can just have maximum employment, and it won't create the inflationary scenario that they were anticipating it would have. So, all right. I don't know if I explained that all right, but I think I got it. Kind of lost my train of thought in the middle of it all. All right. I shaved my head today. Save a bundle on haircuts. Yeah, haircuts are expensive. I took Freddie to go get a haircut yesterday. Sarah got a haircut too, and it looks really nice. We need a catalyst to start the inflation, like rising oil prices and stock market losses. Yeah, I don't know. What time is it? Okay, guys, I'm going to call it quits. We had a great time out here with you. We have 233 people watching with 183 likes, $13.96 in super chats, because you guys are always so awesome with those super chats. Let's see, what do I got going on today? Hey, if you're in the Astoria area, come on out for bingo. We're going to be playing bingo at the Workers tonight. Starts at 6:30. So that's always a lot of fun. And let's see, one last one. Same, it was a great being on here near the end of your stream. Right on, man. Well, it's great having you here, Ordinary Man. You guys are awesome. Uneducated Economist, you let me know.